and welcome to Supporting Small Businesses to Grow by formalizing the operations and addressing legal requirements. And today's webinar is going to have two amazing guests. Our specialist guests are Nicolene Schoeman, who's a law practitioner from Pocket Advisor, and Andile Yengeni from SEDA, who's the district manager in Nelson Mandela Bay. So as you know, we had our polls, and now Christoph was putting them all together in the background. And here are our awesome results of what is happening, what is going on within the country of all our small businesses. And as practitioners, what are we faced with, and how can we start helping our clients? And about 22%, so Christoph, feel free to come in here, 22% don't have needed business finance, and not enough clients have access to new markets. Wait, is this the right one? Oh, they're not growing. Sorry, I'm a bit confused now. So why are small business clients not growing? Because they don't have business finance. They don't have new access to markets. And so that's about 22 to 25%. And unhappy clients that do not repeat.
So that will be interesting to hear when Andile and Nicolene speaks, how they reflect on that. So in our room, it's clear that people say finance and access to markets are the major stumbling blocks in business growth. So we can do a bit of a reality check a bit later on. I hope I've got the statistics right with the next question.
So sorry, just go back one more quickly in just line with what Sisbongi had spoken about. Also, don't have the capacity and skills to deliver or unable to secure ongoing contracts. So that's an interesting, there's already another, 26% and 13% of capacity and delivery. So that's something that we can see how we can help. I just thought it would be good to bring that in.
Yes. So I think we are very quick to save money, funds, blame the banks, and to be aware that we don't have enough clients, but there may be some other stumbling blocks. So that's what I look forward to hear from Nicolene and Andile today around formalizing your business and how we can help our clients to formalize so that those issues are perhaps disappearing. Yeah. And then the second one was, why do your small business clients resist formalizing? And that's interesting, eh?
Sure. So 20. Go ahead.
Taxes. They're worried about the taxman is going to come and grab them, which is a real worry, eh? So I mean, if you're operating below the radar and you're not registered in any way for income tax as a business, or maybe not even as an individual, it may be a big concern. So as soon as I start formalized, the receiver of revenue is going to know about me. How can we as practitioners guide our clients through that process of understanding how that works and what the benefits are, and where the benefits actually outweighs the possible compromises that you need to make? And then that other one, other two, perhaps, they think it will cost too much to formalize, maybe it doesn't, maybe you can save money by formalizing, and they believe that they are too small to make it worth their while, so it's also for Andile and Nicolene perhaps to reflect on that. I'm not sure if there's anything else there. We score low on all my clients are compliant. So only 5% saying all my clients are compliant. So there's indication for you.
That's interesting, yeah.
And then the last question was about using a lawyer or referring your clients to a lawyer. And so that's interesting. Yes, I've been able to find a lawyer for some of my clients. It's the one that scores really high, but the one that's the most, 30%, is no, I don't have access to a lawyer to refer them to. So we as business support practitioners perhaps can increase access to services, professional services that our clients can have by tying up with people like Nicolene. So let's hear what she has to say a bit later.
And then that one for 13% of just above that, no, my clients do not need support from a lawyer. So that would be an interesting, at what point do you realize you need support from a lawyer?
No. So if we can get going, Tobeka, with the question, what is your biggest frustration in helping small businesses to formalize? And anyone can type in the text chat if we have time towards the end, we may even bring you in to talk if you have an interesting point to make. But what is your biggest frustration in helping small businesses to formalize? You can use the text chat to type in there what your experience is in supporting small firms. And, you know, sort of with that, I'll hand over to you, Tobeka, to lead our two distinguished guests in telling us more about how we can support our clients through this formalization process.
Wonderful. So you can, so you can just share the slide. So at this moment, I think I'm going to welcome Nicolene to share with us. So she brings in the law aspect of it and their organization on why they support, why they feel it's important that we would pull them in. If I'm that 13%, convince me, okay, I need to pull you in and why.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you so much for having me today. So thank you for the warm introduction. My name is Nicolene. I am a practicing lawyer. I've been practicing law in Cape Town now for 15 years. Before then, I was based in the Free State and in Gauteng. So I've been working in most of our provinces, or most of our major provinces. And since my time in Cape Town, I've had the privilege of working with many entrepreneurs across the country in different levels of their journey. What I will say is that when we start a compliance journey, and often because we only work with entrepreneurs at Schoeman Law, we've noticed that there's a major barrier between small business and lawyers or attorneys. And many of these barriers go to cost, and it go to accessibility, and it goes to time issues. So it took us on a journey as a firm almost 10 years ago to really look at what is working and what isn't working, but crucially, why? And to ask the question without being afraid of what we may find when we ask the question genuinely. So there are a lot of barriers, which when I share my presentation, hopefully I'll explain to you that many of the things we see and we hear from our small business community, which ultimately either links to their success or their failure, has a legal cause in it. Now, for these guys, most of the reality is that you need to be at your business. You need to get the next deal. You need to sign the next deal. You need to run the business and be there. And therefore, asking them to embark on a journey that will take months, cost a lot of money, and ask of them to be present in a lawyer's office is often not the most appropriate solution. And that's really where Pocket Advisor was born from. Yes, when do you need a lawyer? That's one of the key questions you asked us. I would love to tell you before you get into trouble, before a summons lands for an unpaid account, or before you have to sue one of your clients because they haven't paid you as a small business. I would love to say that the reality is that we are on the forefront of that and we prevent that. But the reality is we often only see those small business clients when something does go wrong. So we are positioning and hoping to force a change in the thinking from the entrepreneur side, but also from the legal profession side, to say, how do we do this before we have to fight for survival because someone hasn't paid, and it really makes a big impact. So from my side, hopefully, even if it's only one takeaway, we are less reactive and more proactive in how we service these clients, how we advise them, and how we guide them towards unlocking valuable opportunities for them.
Gotcha. Thank you, Nicole. So you're going to now share with us your slide as well, and just hand over to you on that. Thank you. So it's about being proactive instead of reactive. I think that's the $1 million answer there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So everyone, today I'm here in my capacity as a representative of Pocket Advisor, which is a technology-based tool which we use to journey small businesses and early stage entrepreneurs through their compliance journey. We do it in a video format. We test what they've learned, and we provide them with all the resources they need to implement what they've learned. But let's I think, go to the starting point. And that is really, I can just see my slideshow isn't moving on as it should. Apologies for that. I am going to change my setting quickly. Just bear with me. Okay. Okay. Apologies for that, everyone.
No worries.
So essentially, we need to talk about the problem that exists and the gravity of the problem within the South African context. Now, what I'm about to tell you, I don't think is anything new. If we saw in the last 5 years, prior to COVID, we saw a business failure rate of around 68% if we looked at Stats SA's official statistics. And I'll get to the reasons that have been officially ascribed to the business failure. Since the pandemic hit, we saw some statistics emanating from last year, that the 5-year term has now become a 12-month term, and it has increased to 75% of all new businesses not making it through their first year. Now, that is absolutely critical, and it is absolutely, I think, extremely troubling for us to look at these statistics. So let's look at some of the reasons. Some of the reasons have inadvertently been touched on in the polls. We've looked at access to finance, or the lack of access to finance, whether that is bank finance, whether that is investment finance, whether that is private equity or VC finance, let's call it that. There are issues in entering supply chains, in other words, accessing markets, corporate or government, by the way. There are legal disputes. If we look at another statistic, which you may find interesting, I challenge you to Google the Department of Justice's court case statistics. We've seen almost 1,000% increase in debt collection cases. In other words, people not paying other people, predominantly by small businesses, over the last 12 months. It's the most unprecedented excess or increase in statistics we've seen. And then, of course, what about the reputational damage of sites like Hello Peter or Google reviews, where unhappy customers of these small entrepreneurs vent their frustrations online, give poor reviews, and that then results in the ratings dropping. They become invisible over time. And eventually that's a gaping hole that bleeds the business dry over a question of a couple of months or years. So the good news is, I don't want to just give you bad news, is that we address all these issues at Pocket Advisor. But before I get to how we do that, let's look at some of the options available to your entrepreneurs you are working with, or people within your inner circle, if something like Pocket Advisor doesn't exist. Firstly, if we have to refer them to a lawyer, now I'm speaking as a lawyer, you would ask them to invest 5 to 10 hours of their lives, the entrepreneur's life, into consultation. Depending where you go, this could cost them about 10,000 Rand, if not more, depending on what this person charges and how senior they are. This will be in a lecture style, giving them information about what you can and cannot do. They have no solution in this phase yet. We are just talking, right? Then there'll be a drafting exercise, usually of a range of contracts. Now, they will be asked for 48 consecutive hours, not on the same day, spread over a week to a month, etc., in order to comment on these documents that they are commissioning to get drafted. And then, of course, this whole thing, if you're working with someone that is fairly efficient, will take about 6 months. and they'll be in for between 100, let's say 100 and 200,000 Rand. Maybe less, maybe more, but it's a lot of money for an early stage entrepreneur, and that's really the point. And many of them know this. Let's be real. Yes, there has been some innovation. There are a number of products out there that give access to downloading contracts so that you at least limit the drafting expense. The problem is we don't always know where these templates come from. Sometimes it's not even South African. It is not even from a lawyer. And then they go and implement these documents in their businesses. And it's actually in many ways worse than not having it in the first place. So that is what the reality looks like if we don't start looking at solutions like Pocket Advisor. What we do at Pocket Advisor is we actually have a solution founded on two core principles. We know what it feels like to be an entrepreneur. We know what hard work it takes. I know how much it takes because I am an entrepreneur. I started not only the legal practice, but a number of other businesses as well. You need to have time in your business. You need to have time to work on your business, not in your business. And that's why our solution asks for a time commitment, which I'll go through shortly, of a few hours as opposed to a few months. And you have a reliable source of contracts as part of the Pocket Advisor program, which can be accessed at no additional charge. So what does this look like? Well, for an early stage entrepreneur without any employees, we charge 1,495 Rand a person. They then get access to the platform. There are 5 modules. There's the outline on your screen. Each of these is in a video format, and it's intended to be friendly. It's intended to be practical. We even facilitate these if you join one of our cohorts. And it includes 7 contract templates for free, which they can populate and download as part of the process. So the idea is, let us show you what your rights are, how best to apply it in your business, and give you the tools to go and implement it whilst it's fresh. If you have employees in the business, then the Legal for SMEs is the other option, and it deals with those 5 topics on the screen, 1,895 Rand a person, and it includes over 15 contract templates, again, from a reliable source. So if any of the clients that we are jointly servicing is unsure about whether this can work for them, we also offer webinars. They are available on Quicket. I'll share all the links in the chat box shortly. And that will give them a bit of a feel of what the programs look like, and then to join one of our cohorts for facilitations, or simply to make use of it without needing any facilitation. So in a nutshell, that is what we do. I see we've got a question. Shall I go over to answering some of them?
Yeah, if you want to, if you're at the end and you want to tackle some of it, feel free. It's all yours.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've got a question about how do we address points 1 and 2. Now, points 1 and 2 on my little checklist was the issue of access to funding and markets. Now, let's go back to the theory here. Remember, I mentioned in my introduction that we see symptoms. So let's think of someone feeling ill, right? Often we find that we are showing a symptom. We are potentially maybe fluish, but it could be something much deeper and underlying causing that symptom. So in the same way as that manifests in the body, we often see issues manifesting in the business that always, in my mind, have a legal cause. So if, for example, you are unable to get funding, we need to ask those funders or investors why they wouldn't want to invest in the business. Now, it could be because you don't have your compliance in order, you don't have proper contracts, structure is really missing, and you are perceived as a high risk investment as a result of that. Secondly, as for access to markets, in many ways, the same situation. Why? Because in many ways, a client sees maybe not a structured quotation or a T's and C's being given to them, and they think, oh my goodness, if they can't even onboard me in a structured manner, how can they actually do the work? If we start talking about procurement, we all know procurement processes are very complex, and usually there's a checklist as long as our grocery lists, if not longer, saying what we need to submit. So to answer the question, we ensure that you are legally compliant. We help you with your tax clearance application, or where to go, what to do, what to fill in, any of the business registrations that need to happen, Department of Labor, Compensation Commissioner, and so on. And we then go through explaining corporate governance, how you need to deal with those, with the decision-making mechanisms, how do you put your tender pack together. All of that is covered in the course material. So I hope that answers the question. Then we've got a question about the agricultural sector. If you don't mind, I'm going to attempt that one as well. We actually have done quite a lot of work in the agri sector, specifically with small upcoming farmers. And often we find, and this is not specific to the agricultural space, I just want to make that very clear. I think many of our programs, whether it's private or government sector based, often focus on the skill required for the business, whether that's agricultural knowledge and skill, whether that's manufacturing, whatever. We focus a lot, and we focus really well in South Africa on building the skills. We don't always focus as much on running the business in terms of the legal compliance specifically. So to answer the question, I find that often these guys they're not even aware of the fact that even if you're a small scale farmer just starting out, you are going to employ people at some point. You need employment contracts. You are going to apply for bank funding or for insurance or for a tender. And then you'll have to have registration papers, MOIs, etc., to have ready to submit in order to unlock that opportunity. So any sector, and I think we haven't focused enough on that.
Great, thank you so much, Nicolene. We have questions. I don't know if there's a hand. Christoph, was there a hand somewhere? I don't know if I've missed some of your questions in the chat. Go ahead, Chris.
I don't see a stand specifically, but if you want to bring in one of the people that asked a question, we can do so now, or we can revert back to our text chat question that we asked earlier. If there are more questions, I think we can revert back to, and Nicolene, I think you're going to stay with us still, so if there are more questions coming up later, we can do so.
There's something Mark wrote in the chat, though. I don't know if he had put it in the Q&A anymore. And there's something in the Q&A, but he was saying, the stats, those stats formalized compliant businesses or SMMEs?
So that's the interesting thing about most of our statistics, right? And I'm preaching to the converted here, I know, but many of our stats, in my mind, from a statistical point of view, remember from a Pocket Advisor point of view, we are measuring impact all the time because we want to see a real tangible difference. So when we speak of the stats, they are from Stats SA. Because they're from Stats SA, I can only assume that it's from CIPC and from SARS records, meaning that our statistics are fundamentally flawed and they are potentially much, much higher, which is even more concerning. It's a high statistic with unreliable data, but I think we've got good cause to say that it's actually much worse out there than what we've seen through the statistical information. I see there is a question on what is a small business. I think that's quite pertinent for us to quickly respond to. There is no formal definition. I want to put that out there. We've got some debates going on with the new Employment Services Act being debated at the moment. And that's been one of the questions that have been raised, that we don't have a SME or a small business definition in law in South Africa. So us answering that question, your guess is as good as mine. From a triple BE compliance point of view, it's under 10 million in turnover. We can use that maybe as a defining term. But the point is, many businesses may have big turnovers, maybe not so many employees, but still have a fairly small operation that they run, but lots of money going in and going out. So I think turnover is a little bit of a skewed metric to pin on. I know we are debating a combination of factors at the moment, number of employees, turnover, debt. There's a whole range of things that are potentially going to inform our understanding of these small businesses and who they are and what they look like.
Nicolene, would you say that, if I can butt in there, would you say that a big distinction or a useful distinction is whether a business is owner managed or not, and that you can have in the BE law or in the Small Business Development Act or wherever different definitions of what a small or a micro or the tax acts even have different definitions too, small business corporation there, and all the definitions are different. But would you say that for our purposes in terms of supporting entrepreneurs, that it's useful to think of a business that is owner managed as opposed to a business that maybe has managers and other shareholders? And then if we say owner managed, it could be a one-person business, and it could be a fairly complicated business, but that the owner is the one that's actually calling the shots as a manager, as practitioner supporting entrepreneurs.
That's actually a very, very good point, a very good question. Thank you for that, Christoph. I think it's a very good metric, but if we go down this rabbit hole, we need to mention that around 75%, excuse me, of our businesses in South Africa are not only founder managed, right? And I'm talking about the big ones included. So small business debate aside, are family-owned businesses. Between 2/3 and 75% of all our businesses in this country are family-owned and run. Yep. So yes, I think that's a good starting point, because the impact is real if something goes wrong. It's not a big corporation where we talk of large-scale retrenchments and people losing jobs and it becomes cold and clinical. It's a question of, if this doesn't work out, someone doesn't get to go to a particular school. Someone doesn't have food to eat tomorrow. It's a very real, very human consideration. So I think if it's owner managed, definitely. And I think size of business, and maybe even years. So fairly new. That's why I like early stage more than startup. The word startup to me has a bit of a tech feel these days. But early stage, meaning we haven't been in this for longer than, I would say, 5 years. So remember, 5 years has always been our benchmark of, are you going to make it or not? Now, I know that's now 12 months from a statistical point of view, but I think in 5 years, you pretty much know where your blind spots are, how you want to expand, what some of your challenges are, better than what you knew in your first 2 years. It's very much like riding a bike, in my view.
Lukani, do you want to share something there? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
No, I wanted to say, if Genio, I'm not sure if I pronounced the name right, raised the hand. If you want to speak now, then before we switch over, we can maybe hear what the question is. But you have to unmute. Otherwise, we can maybe get Lebo Hang to ask the question. What do you think, Rebecca? So we ask Lebo Hang.
Yeah, have they got their hands up? I was just wondering, Lukani, if they want to say anything and just articulate their point.
Lebo Hang is not unmuted.
Okay, go ahead, Lebo.
Lucani is unmute. We can unmute.
Go ahead, Lucani.
You must find the unmute button to speak.
Nazo, okay. Thank you, Lucani. Go ahead.
Good day. Thank you. So, based on the text which I've written during your presentation, I was trying to say, I saw a question asking what's the biggest frustration on running a business. Mm-hmm. So I tend to understand that through the experience which I have while running a business, I got a lot of frustration when I have to do documents renewals and even some of the membership renewals. When I talk about business forums, membership renewals, I talk about organizations such as Proudly South Africans, organizations which each and every year for me as a business to be in contact with them or get some of the information, supply details and anything relating to the business, I have to keep a membership and I have to pay a certain fee to make sure that I'm in compliance with their organization. So the frustration, it comes back to me because every time I ask myself, what can I do to make my business run for more than 5 years without me at least doing renewals day in and day out or each and every year? For example, my company need to be renewed each and every year. I have to go to CIPC and repay. So if in a business environment, we could get a chance where we are able to make it run for a longer period without keeping on doing the
paperwork.
Yes, paperwork.
So and all your time that's spent on that. That's what I'm picking up from your question. Sorry, so thank you, Lucani. Nicolene, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, we were all encouraged by our president's announcement a couple of weeks ago as part of SONA that we would be seeing an ease of regulations, particularly those imposed on small businesses. So as a profession, from a legal profession's point of view, we are really sitting on the edges of our seats, hoping to see some real tangible change. Remember, for me, it's my job to know what regulations exist and how to remain compliant. But I do fully understand that from an entrepreneur's point of view, it's overwhelming. I mean, I think in many ways, we've got it easier than other entrepreneurs because we've got this advantage of having the knowledge. And that's really why we package the knowledge in a way so that we are able to get that foundation in place, the basic understanding of all the things we need to do on an annual basis and so forth. And then also to have regular continuous development webinars where if a new law comes out, for example, POPI was an extreme discussion for quite a few months. And it's in place now, and we've seen our first court decision, or actually our second court decision on the application of POPI within a particular context. So we publish then blogs and different articles and so on in order to explain to entrepreneurs in a normal story fashion, this is what happened to this person, that was the outcome, and this is what we can learn from it, as opposed to expecting all of us to tune into complex discussions on legislative level or to read court cases when we're not lawyers. Only lawyers do that for fun. So the point is we've packaged all the content, we keep it up to date regularly so that to ensure that you have an easier, more digestible resource at your fingertips, as opposed to being left to navigate what has become an impossible situation.
So what I'm hearing, so what I'm hearing here kind of is, so it's good to have a lawyer because the practicalities and the law in action can be a frustration in action for the lawyer. Like we just had our colleague say something, and you being on our side will then be able to go put it to the legislature, if I'm using the right language, to say, actually, this doesn't work because of this, that, and it could change.
Well, we don't have much power to facilitate or lobby change, but our president has indicated that from an investment point of view, we need to ease some of our regulations. South Africa has lost we've lost our spot a little bit to be a prime investment destination because of a lot of over-regulation. And it's across the board, but particularly onerous on a small business. So I think we should see some change, and of course we'll keep an eye out for that. To answer the question as to when you need a lawyer, I would encourage everyone working with small businesses. It really, and I want to say this in no uncertain terms, I see no tangible, real change happening if these guys are left having to go and consult with a lawyer for hours and then saying, I'll get back to you to get this done. You really made massive advancements in technology and using that in the legal space. So let's leverage that, get the foundation right, so that when they do go to a lawyer, they go in with a package of knowledge saying, I have a MOI, for example, in my company. I have a company registration. I have a partner. We have a shareholders agreement. My partner has fallen ill. I need to replace them. How do I do this? Then you've already set the stage for a much more valuable exchange between the lawyer and the entrepreneur, as opposed to saying, I don't have a company registration. I think I do. I'm not sure. I think I have a standard CIP, CMOI, don't have a shareholders agreement, don't know where my partner is, I don't speak to him or her. I have a new one lined up and I've already made them an offer, and now my old partner has come back and they are angry with me. So, and that's often how these things play out from a human point of view, as we don't know how to go about doing things. We may have good intentions, but then the relationships get compromised along the way, and that compromises the business. Bad habits and bad decisions do not have immediate repercussions. It's like having to go to the gym. If we don't see a result, we don't see a result today or tomorrow. Consistency gives us a result. So if nothing else, we'd like to leave that.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Nicolene. And there's some questions in the Q&A tab, so please feel free to tackle some of those. And some of those hands, we will come to you near the end or after, when Andile is now ready for us. And he is now going to share with us the different viewpoint from the SEDA viewpoint. And but Andile, over to you.
You agreed to share my presentation from that end. Thank you.
Okay. That will help indeed. Yeah. I'm talking so much, Sendlibe. Oh, Christoph has got me there faster. Okay, put Chris. I'm back, put Andy. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon to everyone. As my name has been mentioned so many times, Andile Yengeni from the Small Enterprise Development Agency. I'm based in the Nelson Mandela Bay Metro, and we also are responsible for the district around the metro, the Sarah Barkman district. So we're responsible for the metro as well as the Sarah Barkman district. Essentially, I'm going to be very brief in this talk around formalization of businesses. Just to start off with, just to introduce SEDA. I know SEDA is at this point a well-known entity. Just to point out a few things, the fact that we, since 2014, under the Department of Small Business Development, and we have a national office in Pretoria, and it's not a head office. From time to time, people think it's a head office. It's a national office. It's a coordinating office. It's a service provider office. In other words, it services guys like ourselves in the branches. We've got also, as SEDA, offerings which we sort of give to small enterprises, primarily via the branches, but also we have what I am choosing to call corporate offerings. These are services like incubation, quality, technology, transfer assistance, which are offered via the national office. By and large, SEDA offers its services via the branches. Okay, those areas there are where we sort of intervene at the small enterprise. From human resource management, looking at capability, capacity, planning, deployment of staff, perhaps ensuring that there are policies that enable the company to comply with requirements. For instance, your BCEA requires that you have, as a minimum, a letter of appointment, or you must have a contract of employment for your staff. Financial management, from assisting them to set up systems, to helping them with costing, access to finance, identifying potential financiers, identifying also the requirements for one to be able to access funding from those guys. The list is there. I just jump to the bottom, the second last bullet, which talks about stakeholders and networks. That's a critical one, because without networks, small enterprises fall into the trap of not really knowing what's happening around them. Then they get starved of information, critical information, be it technical or financial support. And then the last bit there is on incubation services, as I've just said. Incubation services, quality standards, as well as technology transfer being offered from the national office. And that essentially is how we operate as SEDA. The very first bullet, assessment precedes intervention. That's the one I want to mention there. Similar to when you go to a doctor, it's very rare, if at all anything, that the doctor asks you what medication do you want or what is wrong with you and ends there. But rather they would do an assessment or a diagnostic on you to determine what is the problem. Another point I want to just highlight there is the fact that the owner or manager of the small enterprise has to be ready for change. That's a critical one in terms of resource management, sparing of resources, and ensuring that we make a difference. The point just below that is also critical, in that all decisions that are made whilst the small enterprise is being assisted from SEDA, the decisions are owned by the owners of the business or the managers of the business. However, the practitioner's role is to provide them with information that then enables them to make quality decisions. Okay, we can get on to the next one there. All right, I'm going to take a bit of time on this one. There's been a number of issues that have already been identified that are relevant here, making or assisting with formalization. These are the practical steps. Here I've just put in two areas, finance or financial side and the HR side. But of necessity, there are other aspects where formalization and thus compliance is achieved. On the side of the finance and linked side, there's registration with CIPC, and what that does, it assists the business to be recognized as a registered entity. Okay, once it's registered as an entity, the PTY Ltd essentially means that the owners of the business, bar for if they really get negligent, they have limited liability. So that is, in a way, some way for them to protect their assets, really. So CIPC registration, the typical amount to register, which your typical practitioner should be able to assist from SEDA, that is 175 Rand. We actually are doing registrations not as standalone intervention. That has to be linked with some other assistance that the client would be accessing from SEDA. CIPC registration, where you sort of get 5 names, you would propose those 5 in the order of preference, and they would then indicate to you which one is available, after which then there would be the submission of the rest of the information that's required to see that through. Registration with SARS is essentially effected once the CIPC registration has gone through, but one needs to complete the process by essentially linking up with the revenue service, SARS. If one is employing people, they need to make sure that they do complete the relevant registrations with SARS, because then they must pay they must first deduct anyway from the employees the applicable tax and pay it across to SARS. Also, as a for-profit entity, they also have to make sure that SARS is aware of them, fill in the returns as SARS would indicate in terms of the frequency. The business advisor would assist, the accountant would also assist. And depending on the level of turnover, their sales, they might also be required to register for VAT. Again, there are returns which have to be submitted. The last time I checked, every second month, then they have to submit to indicate their level of sales. Essentially for VAT, what one is doing is registering to be a collector of tax for SARS. So whatever tax is collected for SARS, one has to make sure that one, they indicate their output VAT, which is the VAT that they are collecting as they sell their goods or their services. That has to be then compared to the input VAT. In other words, the VAT that the business incurs in trying, I normally would say, in trying to collect the VAT for SARS. But the input VAT is all the VAT that we pay to our suppliers right across the board. If as it should be, output VAT more than the input VAT, whatever that difference, the company has to make sure that it pays it across to SARS. Otherwise, if it runs into cash flow problems, pays them to negotiate with SARS how it will be paid across the terms. Annual financial statements, one has to make sure in their business that they do this annually, religiously, and accurately. A number of businesses do not do this for years on end, and then it's time they want to sell their business and they are not able to get good value because there is no record of performance of the business. A bank account also, I mean, these guys would have to sort of assist you. When I say these guys, I'm talking about practitioners, assisting the guy, the owner of the business, so that they are able to have a separate bank account. What that does, it enables the business to know exactly what is going on cash-wise and overall how the business is handling its cash. This enables the owner of the business to separate their cash or their money from the business money. Bank account, critical stuff. It assists to prove the owner of the business to whoever they are approaching, for instance, for finance, that they actually have a business. If they don't have a separate bank account, most of the time they will struggle to actually convince anyone that they have an existing and operating business. I give an example of the recent relief funding, which a number of companies tried to access, and a lot of them failed when it got to the bank account, because the requirement is that you give us not only financial statements, but through the bank account, we can see the activities of the business. So that's critical. It helps also with basic disciplines of ensuring that the business is running as an entity as such, and as it is registered, it can do a number of things, including contracting, including buying assets, including accessing finance as the business. With the bank account, with financial statements, all those registrations, that business is able to do those things. It's able to formally act as the lawyers would call it, a juristic person. So it has the authority on its own as a business, naturally represented by the owner or managers in the business. It can contract, it can sell or buy assets. On the HR side, again, we've spoken about the SARS and the requirement to have the tax from the employees deducted and paid across. Also, there has to be registration with the Labor Department to ensure that all the various submissions are done. For instance, there should be also, if you employ people, the business must register with the commissioner under the COIDA Act, that is the act under which compensation can be applied for if, for instance, there is an injury at the workplace or there is a disease contracted at the workplace. It's Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. So what it also forces the business to do is to take the necessary precautions to protect employees, providing the necessary training, providing the necessary safety guards, providing an environment that is conducive to the retention of health and a well-being for the employees. They normally would place on the employer the responsibility to ensure that employees leave the workplace in the same condition they were in when they came. So that's free of injuries, free of illnesses. So it ensures also, if anyone were to be sort of injured on duty, if the employer is registered or, according to COIDA, then that employee can then apply for IOD compensation. The last one they have listed is the UIF, the Unemployed Insurance Fund. Again, it says minimum of 24 hours have to be worked in a month. If, for instance, you have someone working in the business one day a week for 4 weeks, that's like 32 hours. In other words, that person would need to be registered for UIF. 1% of their remuneration becomes what the employer deducts, and the employer also puts another 1% and pays across to SARS a total of 2%. So one has to then make sure that they are sort of complying with this. Other compliance areas as part of the formalization is what I would call technical compliance. An example, we've got businesses, for instance, caterers. Okay, these guys access contracts on an ad hoc basis, ongoing basis. Some of them get smaller jobs, others get quite significant work. But your chisanyamas, your caterers, they are in the food sector. There's a requirement that they must satisfy certain requirements according to HACCP, according to health authorities, also the GMP requirements, so that they are not allowing food to either be contaminated or for food to be spoiled. So they have that responsibility to do that. Okay, some of the benefits, I think I've mentioned some, but if we formalize as businesses, we are able to let government know who all is out there in terms of statistics, which assist government when it comes to issues of policy formulation. So you also have things like incentives, okay, which are also able to be accessed because the business is a formal business as such, is traceable, and it does have the authority and the ability to contract, and would therefore also be able to access incentive schemes. Benefits from COIDA and UIF, naturally that applies for employees, okay? So you become naturally a more attractive employer when you are formalized and you are complying to those requirements. You want to go for funding applications, you would then have track record because you are formalized, you have annual financial statements, you have your bank statements showing what is happening in that business. It assists you. Okay, also if one looks at what happened last year, there was a pandemic. Okay, so government is able to formulate appropriate responses during emergencies. This talks to what happened. We know the stats, over 80% of applicants could not make the requirements, meet the requirements. So they had to be disqualified from the word go without even going into assisting or assessing those that were eventually assisted. So formalizing the business. Also, I am saying the last point there, and this touches on, I've noted one response where it talks about the resistance to formalization. The notion that the formalization is linked to tax, or people are essentially trying to avoid paying tax. I mean, for most informal businesses, the level of, let's say, profit that are realized, it's so minimal. One would just really be registered as a taxpayer and hardly pay anything at all. Growing up in the township, I've seen businesses that were there over the time I was growing up, which are not longer there anymore. The reason mainly the fact that the owners sort of kept away from the taxman, and a result, when the taxman knocked on the door, a lot of them are not around. So it is possible then to have a legacy passed on to generations through formalization, because that business would then make for instance, the SARS a friend of theirs and be in a position to continue to exist going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Andile. Sure, that's a lot of amazing insight and information and steps that we need to take.
Yeah.
So that what you're sharing with us is what needs to be done, so that Nicolene's work, so that Nicolene, the lawyers, can come in and assist us properly. And I liked how you brought in a good example of COVID. And we know God knows what can happen, but we lived to witness the importance of being compliant, because 80% weren't compliant as far as we know, and it's probably worse than that. So thank you. I don't know if there's any questions around what Andile has just shared an insight, but I do know we have two people, Tendai as well as Gineo. So I think I'll start with you, Gineo, and just see if there's anything you want to start with. And then if there's all the questions, we have no questions open. They've all been answered. So Christoph, have you added in the gentleman?
We've got a few people in the room that may want to add.
Dumelo is also there. Can one of you guys unmute, please? You lovely people.
Can you, I'm not sure if I pronounce your name right, Tendai and Boitamelo, we've got you in the room. If you want to speak, you can unmute any of you to explain your question or comment that you made. If there's anyone else that we've noted.
None of them are unmuting.
There was, Boitamelo made a comment on the day about SEDA's, he's part of the SEDA trainers program, Train for Trainers program, and speaks about the combination of financial assistance and non-financial assistance, and suggesting that practitioners advise their clients to actually visit the SEDA branch. I'm not quite sure, sort of if there's anything else that you may add to that, sort of in terms of advising practitioners that may not be aware how the SEDA process works and what kind of support may be available. Andile, if you want to comment on that, perhaps, because Boitamelo has raised that point.
Okay. Look, SEDA primarily provides non-financial services under the various aspects, as I had indicated. But also, SEDA does come in very handy in terms of subsidizing the costs of the implementation of interventions. I'll give you an example quickly. Nicolene is approached due to the need for a client to access legal services, whatever the case might have been. But if there is a need for legal services, okay, we work out mostly, and we are able to subsidize the cost of those services up to 90%. And by the way, we probably might be looking at even increasing that percentage. In deserving cases, it could be up to 100%. In other words, we pay, but what we do not do as SEDA as such is to part with funds as, for instance, a grant or as a loan to the small enterprise. But I would imagine it is a grant in that it's not repayable when we subsidize the cost of the services. So we have within SEDA, that's the first shot. No? The second shot is the fact that we have within SEDA a financial instrument tool, a financial tool. It's called the CPE, Critical Planning Exercise. And through this tool, we are able to assist small enterprises to, one, use reasonable basis to project their income in the future as well as their expenses, so that we can have a projection of the business's future performance. And through that instrument, we are also able to determine some of the ratios that are of importance and interest to funders like SEFA, IDC, and others. The CPE is a critical, it's called critical planning exercise, and it's a critical instrument which the practitioner can use and play games, that's what we say, and play what if games. In other words, do a bit of scenario analysis. What if I get this contract and this is what it's worth? What would be the performance overall of that business? What if I get a new product introduced and this is what it is like? What or how would it affect the overall performance? You are also, through that tool, also able to say, what if I take a bit more time before I pay my creditors? Or what if I extend a bit of credit to my customers? So the influence of that cash coming in late or going out late to creditors is immediately evident, and one is able to take the necessary decisions in line with that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Andile. I will then prompt Clarence to come in because I think all the other three haven't unmuted themselves. So I'm assuming there's some technical challenge. Clarence, please unmute.
Bongi wanted to add a point.
Oh, I didn't see.
Clarence,
sorry, go ahead, Bongi.
Yes, before Clarence can say something, I just want to add on what Andile has already mentioned in terms of the work or the work that SEDA offers in relation to finance, even though we are not offering finance, you know. One of the things that we are doing as SEDA is facilitating access to finance. We're working very closely with SEFA, and SEFA is our sister organization in terms of assisting small businesses to be able to access finance. Even the funding template now that SEFA has is now talking to SEDA's operations in order to fast track the access to finance by the small enterprises. I think I should mention that. The other area where we also provide, but you know, in quotes, finance, is the grant that is offered through a SEDA technology program for small enterprises to access things like technology assistance. And so you get a grant and you will not be expected to pay back the grant. And however, we will assist you to access the technology that you need for your business. And yes, this information I think is crucial for our practitioners to know what SEDA offers, and they will be able to, you know, link the small enterprises as they assist them. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sis Bongi. Okay, Boyd Dumelo, you're unmuted. Go ahead then. Okay, we can't.
Good day, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. So thank you so much. Oh, I hear feedback. I'm not sure if I'm talking with someone else at the same time. Thank you so much for the session. I wanted to find out from Uput Andile. I'm currently a business that's been supported by an incubator that's affiliated with SEDA, that's partnering with SEDA. And it's actually 2 incubations. So what I wanted to find out is, can I also become like a private client where I go to a branch and get assistance from SEDA directly, or how does it work? Does everything have to be via the incubator, or I can also be a private, not private, but rather a member with SEDA? Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Boitumelo. I'll have him answer just now.
There's another
Clarence?
question about incubation. Terusha is asking about how does one access incubation specifically for manufacturing businesses? Maybe that's tied into that question.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure we give all these hands are probably sore from being up by now. Go ahead, Clarence. Go ahead.
Good day. My network connection is a bit bad, but I hope I'm audible to everyone. I just wanted to add
a minute. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add on to the comment that I made in the comment section. What I was saying is that SEDA mainly focuses on the capacitation and non-financial interventions, but they do provide linkage to actual financial institutions. For instance, the NYDA only funds you once you've participated in some form of a business development or entrepreneurial development program. So they do consider those provided by the NYDA itself, as well as those provided by SEDA. So usually what I do is that I encourage individuals to go to the closest branch. If not a national branch, then maybe a satellite branch, which are usually scattered around the townships. You go there, they will give you a set of forms depending on where you are in your business development phase. Those that are in the ideation phase usually just need to fill in the forms, and then you will be invited for assessment. If your company is operational, what they do require is that you bring along at least your market research to show that you actually have seen an opportunity, and then you actually unpack how you've actually discovered the opportunity. So the first step is that you go to a branch and then you fill in the forms so that you become a client. Then from there on, they'll assess you depending on the deficiencies that they identify. They will expose you to a project that is relevant. One thing that I do know they do, sorry for that, is for quality, your ISOs and like your management systems. What I do know is that they have a program where they fund you and you only have to cover 10% of the costs. That's one thing that I do know that they facilitate financially. That's all I wanted to say. I'm not sure.
Thank you, Boitumelo. Good marketing there for SEDA. I'm not sure if you are actually a business owner or you are a business practitioner who supports small businesses. So your information is very good for all of us who are business practitioners, coaches, and mentors, facilitators to support our small businesses. That's great. Terence, Raneu, Tendai, none of you have unmuted, so I think we're going to move on. And we're going to go with those who are unmuted. Nina Tulileyo, if you're quiet, we leave you behind.
Can we go to Janice?
Go ahead. If she's on mute, oh, there's Claire. Okay, Clarence's hand is down, but he's not unmuting. Clarence, please, my friend, unmute. You've sent me messages. I've given you space. It's not happening. So we're moving on.
I think Joanne Miss, I'm not sure, Joanne Miss Modupe, if you want to unmute. And you've got a question to SEDA as a practitioner. If you can't speak, I can read out the question, Andile. Joanne Miss says, as a practitioner, how do I benefit from SEDA if I refer a client? I've seen that I refer clients, but then SEDA would appoint someone else to do the service regardless of the fact that I am registered as a service provider on SEDA's database.
Okay, so I think you have two questions, Geput Andile, that one and the one the boy to Meloshed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Actually, I've just noted also on the Q&A, there's just two that I picked up also. I would like to respond to as well. Thank you. Okay, the former incubatee, you are very free to go to a SEDA branch and be registered as a client, and you can access services from the branch. We normally would also, where there are incubators around where there are branches, especially the guys that are approaching graduation towards exit, we normally would be working with those jointly between the branch and the incubator. So that's all you need to do. You don't have to go through the incubator or anything like that. Naturally, you can tell them at the branch that you are a former incubatee and wherever that incubator, if there's any other information that they might be holding, which might be of use to the branch going forward, you can then let them know about that. Ubo Itumelo, it's very true. Naturally, we are non-financial services, but we do assist with access to finance in that, one, we identify potential funders, two, we identify the specific areas of emphasis from those funders, and as such, when we are assisting, for instance, with putting together an application, we ensure that those areas are specifically addressed. Nicolene is in Joburg. This is on the Q&A, and she's a registered service provider that's looking for opportunities. Nicolene, my advice to you would be to go to the branch, maybe ask to do a presentation of your services. If you've not got work from them, or you've never gotten a RFQ, it might be one of two things, that perhaps in our rotation, there is a little gremlin that's maybe getting stuck and things like that. The alternative is that the service that you are offering has not been sort of called for, in which case the prompt as to which service providers starts off with what service is required at that specific client. Okay, there is another one on the Q&A. They've got a 6 months contract, and they're asking if what they need to do insofar as COIDA is concerned. My advice is get hold of the Labor Department. Whether it's 3 months or 6 months, they will advise you how to do this. If there are payments to be made, if there are sort of submissions to be made, the Labor Department would advise you. My advice is go to the Labor Department. I think the last one was I would imagine, a service provider that's referring clients to SEDA and never gets to assist those clients. All right. Really, and this is something we typically would say to service providers, the fact that you've referred or the fact that you've been privately assisting them is neither here nor there. Do refer them. They will benefit from the subsidy which they get and the other additional advice or advisory services, information that they will receive. Continue doing that. But if you do not get the work, you need to be asking whoever is responsible for SCM. When you don't get, you have a right to ask, what did I miss? How come I did not make? Is it my price? Is it my presentation of what needs to be done? The qualitative aspects of the proposal? One has to ask that. If it's the price, maybe an approximation in terms of what percentage I was above or whatever makes sense, so that you get a sense of where everybody else more or less is quoting. Otherwise, you will continue not getting work if you do not inquire as to why is work not coming your way. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know if there was any question. Nicolene, you were very busy on the chat tab. I know you were responding to some questions. I don't know if there's anything you want to say. Christoph, go ahead. Or Andile, yes?
Yes, there's one here. Someone is asking how they would collaborate with SEDA communication and roadshows. If anyone wants to work with SEDA and they have this proposal, I don't have this, but I will supply it later. There is an open email address where one would then forward their proposals, so that whatever proposals, and it's a national initiative to receive all proposals for unsolicited bids, we call it, because he wants to work with SEDA. SEDA has to then evaluate and look at the uniqueness and the benefits to the beneficiaries and related issues, and would then respond to that. I will dig that email address, and Vusi Tubane would get that email address. I would forward it to you, Tobeka, so that you can forward it to them. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know. Okay.
Now we've got Vusi's email address, Tobeka, since Vusi's raised it.
Yes. Anyway, great. Thank you very much. Nicolene, there's any one takeaway you want to as your closure quickly?
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think we need to be very mindful that the business environment in South Africa has become really challenging, particularly for small businesses that do not have the resources at their disposal. You know, we don't have blank checkbooks, that sort of thing. So I think if nothing else, we are very mindful that it's not easy. The statistics, albeit probably on the inaccurate side, is still probably not reflective of how tough it really is. So I think my only takeaway to leave everyone with is to say, it's tough, yes, but how do we navigate this? And what is the best way of navigating it? Looking at costs, looking at your time investment, not just the actual bill from the lawyer or whatever the case may be, looking at the actual cost, the time away, the distraction away from your goals as an entrepreneur, and looking at viable options to really get yourself to a place where when you have to have that interaction, that you have it in a much better way, much more valuable way for yourself. And for us to, as an ecosystem, to collaborate towards achieving more compliant, more formalized businesses so that they can grow, so that they can enter supply chains, so that they can get the funding they may need, expand. The possibilities really become endless if we solve this one core issue. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you very much for being here, Nicolene and Andile, and just sharing your insight and your experience around this. And all to the panelists, all to the participants who have been here. It's great to have you here, and we look forward to seeing you next month with our next topic that Christoph is just sharing, reinventing your small business client by reinventing yourself. So it's a very interesting thing. It's a two-way